Good evening and a very warm welcome to First Issues. February has just begun, but many of those New Year resolutions have already fallen by the wayside. Once again, we're reminded just how hard those old habits are to break. We may have had great aspirations for furthering our careers in 2016, but now are possibly fearing that we may be relegated to the very same position we vowed to get out of with the beginning of a new year. A true recipe for failing in our careers. Most of us spend more time researching major items we're going to purchase than looking at how we're going to position ourselves in this ever-changing market, and which many people say is a sure recipe for underemployment, frustration, or even hopelessness. Stuart tells us the main ways in which we can be sure that we're headed for failure in our careers.
Failure is about making bad choices. And that's the thing about a career or planning a career, that you will fail inevitably if you make bad choices or choices that are not right for you, or maybe that's the same thing. And one of the most common things that I find, especially with younger people, is going for careers that maybe offer big money, for example. So I want to be a doctor, I want to be a lawyer because it pays so much, even when that's not really where your heart or your passion or your real skills lie. Another common error is when we choose careers because that's what our parents did, or that's what we saw around us. So the people within our family or our network are doctors and lawyers, and therefore that's what we choose, or engineers. And another very common one is when we choose careers that our parents think we should have. And oftentimes you find that our parents will steer their children into respectable professions instead of steering them into where their real strengths or passions lie. So I think that's the number one killer for your career, is finding yourself in the wrong job. And then it's very hard to energize yourself. It's very hard to feel job satisfaction. You've chased the title, you've chased the pay, but yet there's this hollowness in your soul because you're not doing the right thing.
We've been told that the world of work is very different. Where in the past, somebody would work 20 to 30 years in the same job, and it was pretty linear. Now the market, or the job market, I should say, is more volatile. Yeah. What should we understand about career planning in this dynamic 21st century? Yeah,
absolutely. Many years ago, you would qualify as a carpenter, for example, and you'd stay a carpenter for your whole life. Now the world of work changes so dramatically, probably because of technology, the digital age. So people are having to learn the whole time. What you would do early on in your career, you'll be doing it completely differently 20 years on. So I think in your planning, you've got to have an understanding that the job that you go for as a graduate may not well be the job that you end up with. As you develop more skills and abilities, and as the world of work changes, you're going to have to adapt and change. So it's all about continual learning now, not so much learning at the university level, but more learning and acquiring new skills that become more appropriate.
So what is the starting point when you do go about planning your career? Do you look, as you said, for that job with the most money? Do you look at the job market and say, this is where the opportunities are? Do you look at the economy and say, Botswana needs more people with more practical skills? How do you go about doing it the right way for yourself?
Sure. I think all of those things are important. Planning is a cognitive process. In other words, it's a thinking process. So that's where careers start. It starts when you start to think about, what am I good at? What do I want to do? Where am I likely to do the best type of work? And spending time understanding yourself, knowing your strengths, your weaknesses, knowing the sort of activities you like to do, and then going out and exploring what is available to you. And that starts by obviously exploring if you've done a degree, what sort of things you will be able to do with that degree, what sort of doors will open for you. But it is also a lot to do with going out and exploring and speaking to people who are in different industries. I know a lot of people, especially with midlife career changes, people will come to me and say, oh my God, I've been a lawyer and I've been a lawyer for the last 20 years. and I've actually hated it. I've hated it for 20 years because I didn't really know what law was, but I'd watched LA Law on TV or this program and that program. I loved the way they dressed. So everything that was created in the mind about that profession was not what the profession was all about when you got into it. So really taking the time to understand the job that you want to apply for or the career that you want to have, speak to other people that are in those careers and say, what is it like? What do you have to do most of the time? What do you rarely get to do? What do you like about the job? What do you dislike about the job? And that's where things like understudying or job shadowing can be very important before you make the career choice.
Maybe you made the right career choice and are enjoying the path you chose, but are wondering what it is in your performance that could be hindering you from advancing to maybe a next leadership position. Stuart tells us the most common mistakes that people make that hinder their advancement.
It's a common question that I get asked, but I think one of the problems is understanding that not everyone can actually move to leadership positions. And that causes so much unhappiness with people because in our minds, we all feel that's the route that we've got to go. But if you understand that leadership is very much a pyramid and that there can only be a tiny little space on the top for the top achievers, you might not be the top achiever, but you might be brilliant at other things. So for example, that's why great specialists, for example, don't always get to move into leadership positions because they're just great specialists. Leaders are a different skill set. So that's one of the things I think there's a problem, that everyone thinks they should be climbing up that ladder instead of saying, what will my legacy be where I am? What will I be absolutely outstanding at, and how can I be better even at the level that I'm in? I think communication skills is probably the key skill in business. If you can communicate well and relate well to people, because that's what leadership is all about, then you've got a good chance of climbing that ladder. And the other thing is about attitude, and I hate to use that word passion because it seems like such a cliche. It is a bit of a buzzword. In fact, I always say to people, don't use it on your CV, because if I see another passionate, dynamic person, I think I will scream. But that real applying of energy and enthusiasm, because that's the starting place for delivering of results. You don't get anything done unless you're really prepared to energize and move it. So I think that's really, really important. And it's also one of the things in business that we notice. We notice people who have a good attitude, a good energy, a positivity about them. So I think people that don't have that, it's very hard for them to climb the ladder.
When we speak of aspirations and career planning, there are thousands of Botswana currently unemployed and looking for a job and probably pounding the pavement every day, knocking on doors and wondering what they could be doing better to stand out from the thousands that are unemployed currently to secure a job. Do you have any advice for them?
You hear a lot of people saying, well, if you're unemployed, be entrepreneurial. And that's just not ridiculous, but that will probably really only be workable for about 5% of that population, because we're not all entrepreneurial. So if that's not your skill set and that's not within your strength, it's very hard to go out there and be an entrepreneur. So I would say stop beating yourself up about that, because that's not a reality. And also the access to funding and those resources is difficult. So I think as a graduate that's unemployed, your job at the moment is to continually to work hard to try and find a job. That's important. And maintaining positivity while you do that. So that means applying for as many jobs as you can, trying to increase your network, introducing yourself to people, doing your homework, putting yourself in front of people who are decision makers as often as possible. The other thing that I would urge young people to do is to go out and find jobs to do, even if it's not going to pay you. And I know that gets a lot of bad negative publicity, so I'm not talking about slavery, but I'm talking about go and do some charity work. You know, being industrious is so important for your mindset and your soul. And if you can sit in an interview and say, I've been unemployed for 2 years, but you know what? This is how I spent these 2 years when I was unemployed. I did this, I did that, and that's just on the charity work or getting involved or being active, as opposed to maybe lounging in front of the TV for a whole day, which I know that we all wake up and we've got nothing to do, that's what we want to do. And the other thing is about continuing to learn. So be reading, be active, be going to the library, be surfing the internet, but actively learning some stuff. And then health and wellness. And so be active and be engaged so that when you do enter the workplace, you haven't spent 2 or 3 years just, you say, pounding the pavements, directionless, or lying at home on the couch.
In a country that is currently going through some tough economic times, I feel there sometimes might be the perception that chasing job satisfaction and looking to be happier in your role could be a bit frivolous. Instead of just doing what you have to do, meeting your responsibilities and pushing on with that. How would you address that mindset? Is it truly crucial to have that job satisfaction, or should you just ensure that the bills are paid?
Well, I would challenge you to try and find anyone that would almost agree that we should not be searching for happiness now or finding satisfaction in the job, because that's just who we are. That's our expectation. People 100 years ago just did terrible jobs for terrible rewards and were terribly miserable. Where we are, more evolved, more educated, more demanding, we're just going, no, sorry, not doing it. So people want that work-life balance a lot better, and they want satisfaction and they want happiness. And I think people feel that that is their right, as indeed it is their right, to be happy, to be fulfilled. Yeah, why not?
You've touched on my next question. In this era of consistently upskilling, studying while you work and all of that, is it possible to find that crucial work-life balance?
I don't think that it's, not only is it possible, but it's absolutely essential. I think that balance is just so important in our lives. If you're trying to ride a bike, for example, and you don't have balance, you can't go anywhere. And it's almost like a natural law. If you're going to be working all the time and only focusing on one thing, you're going to sacrifice other things. We have an appreciation now about how holistic wellness needs to be, and happiness and all of those things. And that is scheduling not only just time to go to work, but also time to do things like engage in spiritual activities, or engage in exercise, or reading, or things of beauty, all of those things, and family and relationships, all of those things that makes us feel whole as people. What you find with the people who are entering the workplace at the moment is they are very aware of work-life balance. So where my generation or their parents' generation valued structure and routine or conformity, they want autonomy and independence, and that includes to wanting flexibility with their 9-to-5 job, for example. And don't mistake that for laziness. You know, I was on a radio show the other day and they were saying the millennials are lazy. And I was going, no, millennials just don't want to sit at the desk from 9 to 5, but you will often find them working late into the evening on their mobile application. They'll still do the 60, 70-hour week, but they want to do it with greater flexibility. And the greater flexibility is where we find the balance.
In Botswana, some industries aren't fully developed yet, especially maybe the arts, jewelry designers, musicians, writers. What do you say to somebody who has to choose between the very legitimate needs for money and self-actualization or job satisfaction? How do they choose?
Those are the questions that you've got to ask yourself. In some instances, in extreme cases, do I be an actor and be poor, but feel fulfilled because I'm doing something I love? Or am I prepared to put that aside and go for something that's going to give me the stability, the security? Those are questions you have to ask yourself, and it's decisions that we make the whole time. There's not one decision that's better than the other. But then what you can do is you can find ways to fulfill those in part-time ways. So you still find yourself, let's say, for example, you did love something like theatre, but you were unable to take a career in theatre and you do something else. You can still get involved in theatre in other ways or do that part-time, etc. I think the problem with career planning is people don't know themselves well enough, and they don't take the time to know themselves well enough. They don't take the time to sit down and ask those questions about who am I? What do I really want? What am I prepared to pay for it? What am I prepared to sacrifice for it? And that's why we see so many people in mid-career going, I should never have done this.
That concludes our conversation with Mr. White. Up next, we discuss Japanese business etiquette with the Japanese ambassador to Botswana himself, just in case your career ambitions stretch beyond our borders. Welcome back to First Issues. As in this portion of our program, we begin a series in which we'll be looking at different business etiquette practices from around the world. Our thinking is that in this globalized world, the modern business person can expect intercultural exchanges that the bit of insight we're looking to provide could definitely help smoothen over. Apparently, Japanese business etiquette is one of the most searched for Japan business-related keywords on Google. So we found it fitting to begin our weeks-long look into different practices with Japan itself. Japan and Botswana already have a good working relationship. A 2014 report from Japan's finance ministry shows that Botswana had imported 323 million pula worth of goods from Japan and exported 176 million pula worth of goods to said country. Those looking to further their individual pursuits in the country should know that Japan is described as being a highly structured and traditional society, where great emphasis is placed on personal responsibility, loyalty, politeness, and furthering the good of the group rather than the individual. In this era of multinationals and interconnectivity, business etiquette practices have become somewhat standardized. But Japan's ambassador to Botswana, Masahiro Onishi, alerts us to some practices that could be considered unique to his country.
I would like to mention the practice of business card exchange is unique to the Japanese business culture. And having been working here in Botswana about 1 year and 3 months, I fully recognize that this practice is unique to Japanese business culture. Of course, some business person in Botswana give me a business card, but others not. But in Japan, the business persons exchange their business card when they meet for the first time. The business card is very helpful to contact a necessary person in the future.
Japanese business cards, known as meishi, are treated with utmost respect and typically exchanged using both hands by the Japanese. On a one-week business trip, people are encouraged to carry a minimum of 100 bilingual business cards, with your language of choice on one side and Japanese on the other. Also, the numbers 4 and 9 are considered unlucky in Japanese culture, so gifts of anything in sets of 4 or 9 are probably not a good idea. What about us then? What does Ambassador Onishi tell those who are looking to explore business opportunities in Botswana to expect with regards to business etiquette? Therefore, an outside look in could be quite educational.
The people of Botswana appreciate the hard work or work ethic of Japanese people as well as Japanese technology. So I will say that you should operate in a way that you can transfer both your technology and your work discipline or work ethic. And from another viewpoint, I think that the government of Botswana is giving priority to charity activity. So I would say the Japanese company who wants to operate here that you should engage in CSR activities when you launch your business in these countries. And also, I would say to speak some setsuana, just like greeting. It will help you to make a business in this country. And finally, there is a difference in the speed of work between Japan and Botswana. And I think it is a reflection of cultural difference. So for example, if there is a meeting, in Japan, people gather at least 5 minutes before the meeting. But here in Botswana, I would say not to come too early, and arriving at on time is right and enough. To the Botswana people who try to make a business in Japan, I would say that there are some common features in the characteristics of Botswana people and the Japanese people. Both people are very calm and gentle and not aggressive. So I would say that to the Botswana people that when you build a business based on such characteristics in common characteristics, you can make most of those characteristics. So the Japanese people will accept you very smoothly. But I would like to say that, as I told you earlier, there is a difference in the speed of work. So in Japan, you should get used to Japanese speed. So you'd better arrive at least 5 minutes earlier than the appointed time. And also, as I told you already, the business card is very important in Japan. And also, it is good to use some Japanese, like greetings. It will surely help you to make a business in Japan. For example, konnichiwa means a good day, and hajimemashite means how do you do, or nice to see you. Arigatou gozaimasu means thank you, and sayonara means goodbye. Yeah, these 5 words is very useful for you.
In conclusion, we leave with some advice found on the Eurotechnology Consultants website, in which they say that the Japanese customer has quite different tastes and needs, and that quality, response and service requirements in that country are typically higher than that in other countries. They say in order to be successful in that country, one must be willing, able and prepared to go up against some strong local competition. In the end, it is your products and services that will help you win. Substance trumps etiquette. Until next week and another issue of interest, I, Namitso Semakula, the team behind First Issues, and our sponsors, First National Bank, wish you a good night and pleasant viewing. Arigato.